Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TVOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Mistakes Were Never Made, written by ArgusTheCat. Chai, Captain Polgara Zin, stalked down the cold metal corridor in the inner depths of his ship. Janga ships were designed, like every species' ships, in a way that made sense to their builders. And so, while his ship had a bridge midway down the spine for a commanding view of the battle, and the shield generators situated nearest the fighter base to screen them during launch, so was their brig here, deep inside the ship, so that anyone trying to escape from the lackluster guards on punishment duty here would have to fight through the whole ship to get to anything resembling an escape. Of course, that meant that the captain had a long walk to interrogate a prisoner, but it was worth it, sometimes. As Zin came to one bulky door with a guard outside, he saluted and gave a dismissing gesture. The guard moved quickly to open it for him, either out of respect or simply bored enough to take any chance at work. The smell of the harsh cleaning substances used on the floors and recycled air of the hallway was replaced by a more lively scent as he stepped inside. The smell of heavy breath, body heat, and blood. Stepping into the interrogation chamber, he gave a shuffling of his neck frills, similar to a human sigh, but with the added cultural connotation of showing that one was comfortable enough to express that sort of relief. Comfortable enough, because they were in command of the situation, and the only other person in the room was strapped to a very unpleasant-looking chair. The human had been captured during a raid on one of their fleet resupply stations 2 days ago, and his presence offended the captain. He was clearly not a warrior, none of the layered muscles, mass, or implanted weaponry that they'd found on human marines. Instead, it was a mess of short blonde hair that reminded Zin too much of his own down, and soft eyes and a soft face that was currently bleeding. Why was it bleeding? He hadn't ordered any interrogations to start. Unacceptable. Guard! The shouted command gave no room for interpretation, and the unfortunate enlisted sailor scurried into the room behind him. Yes, Captain, the underling asked, saluting, a look of minor fear in his eyes. Did you damage the prisoner before I got you? The question was direct. He learned in his years as captain that being direct was the best way to get straight answers. Crewmen could find so many ways to avoid giving a response that might offend a superior. The guard broke eye contact, guilt painted on his face. Sir, he was, insulting. I overreacted and... The explanation began, but it was too late. Zin had a duty as captain after all. The plasma blade took the guard's arm off at the second elbow. Nothing overly serious. And to his credit, he didn't even scream as the limb hit the floor, merely grinding his teeth together. A small bit of fluid leaked from the side of his mouth. Retracting the blade, Zin gave a short nod as the punishment for failure was completed effectively. Get out! Take that with you! He gestured to the chunk of flesh. If the crewmen got to the medbay in time, they might yet survive to be discharged at the next stop. As the hatch closed behind the retreating back of the guard, Zin turned around to see the human with his mouth hanging open. Holy shit! It blurted out. I apologize, human, for the failure of my guard. You are not to be damaged before interrogation. He may be a Janga captain on top of the line battleship, and they may be at war with humanity, but there was no reason not to be polite. This human, though, seemed far less inclined towards protocol. Feck that! You don't need to interrogate me at all. I'll tell you whatever you want, just don't chop my fecking arms off. Odd. This is not normally how interrogations with human military personnel went, and Zin said as much. Why are you so eager to betray your people? The human kept taking glances at the small box at Zin's belt from which the plasma blade could be produced as he answered. Man, I'm not trained to resist torture. You'll get it out of us anyway, so engineers are just trained to tell you what you want and try to negotiate release. Can I be released? No. The question was different, but his answer was not. Worth a try, the human sighed. So, what do you want to know so you don't cut me up? This was going much smoother than expected. With a bit of luck, he'd have something positive to report to his superiors without having to embellish anything. Well, start off with, tell me your name and function. I'm Second Engineer Class Michael Barkley. I work primarily on post-repair inspections. I'm kind of my crew's intern, almost. I spend a lot of time doing paperwork, writing reports on problems with warship construction, that sort of thing. So, would you be able to tell me about the human forces during the Second Battle of Valhalla? Information on the new weapons deployed there would be quite valuable. The human, Barkley, gave a confused look. If I remember the reports correctly, it was mostly just having an equal number of ships and we still took heavy losses. I'm not an admiral, dude. He checked his datapad for recommended questions. What about constructions of new human dreadnoughts? Would that be within your realm of specialization? Oh yeah, kind of. We've been having trouble with fighter manufacturing since there's usability problems with the amp crystals that we've been using. It's setting us back a while on the new carrier launches. Actual usable data. This would explain why their fleets had been seeing fewer carriers. What else could he get from this strangely helpful human? The repair procedures of your destroyer vessels. Are you retrofitting them as they are fixed for battle damage? Oh man! Despite the human's restraints, he still seemed to sigh with his whole body. You would not believe how much of the clusterfuck it is to patch up a destroyer. Zinn unfurled a single shoulder tendril in interest, and either Barkley knew enough about Jampar physiology to know that it meant to go on, or else he was just too caught up and did so anyway. The management is a nightmare. There's usually 3 people in charge of different parts of the project, and they never coordinate properly. It takes forever to get decent orders, so we usually just end up having to set up our own comms with other teams and working that way. It's a giant pain in the ass to actually fix anything. We're supposed to retrofit too, but the supply runs never arrive quite in time, so we work with what we have just to get it battle ready. That is fascinating. Are all engineering pursuits run this way? Barkley shrugged as much as he could. I don't know. I haven't seen any reports on it. It looks like it's just the destroyers because they're a lower priority. Zinn made some notes on his datapad. Thank you, that is useful, I think. Or at least something that I can report to my superiors. This has been a very productive interrogation, and I don't think I'll need to injure you at all. Oh, well, thanks. Barkley may have been a little too comfortable after being allowed to ramble about workplace problems. Enough so to express sarcasm at any point. The captain turned to leave, then thought for a minute and turned back, disabling the recording feature on his datapad. He set it aside from the small table and leaned forward. I have one final question, just from me. Now it was the engineer's turn to raise an eyebrow. Yeah? How? How are you winning the war? The question was treason. If anyone heard him ask it, he'd be executed for sure. But he had to know. What? Are you nuts? I thought you guys were winning. No sarcasm this time, just pure surprise. The response shocked the captain as much as the question had his prisoner. You steal victory at every opportunity. You cut down strategic targets wherever they are presented. Your people are ruining mine, and this war is tilting in balance. And I want to know, for a species that reports nothing but failure, how are you winning? His voice had risen to a shout, and he was glad now that he'd sent the guard away before beginning here. The human leaned back, perhaps in fear, as the captain had grabbed the arm of the chair and pushed forward, demanding to know the secret. We thought you were winning. The panicked words spilled out of the man, and before he could be asked anything else, he kept going, out of fear of retribution. We have access to your datanet, and I'm sure that you have some of ours, and yours doesn't have any propaganda or media or anything. It's all just victory reports and almost no lost mentions. And your maintenance guys keep everything in perfect order, and your tech seems 50 years ahead of ours, and it's just a little demoralizing, you know? We're just barely hanging on, and you're crushing us. The captain leaned back, looking down on the somewhat pathetic engineer. He began to understand what had happened. What, he asked, is your job, your specific day-to-day job? Well, like I said, I mostly write reports and spot failure on battleship systems. Failure. Reports on failure. The human kept trying to cower away from the captain's form, even though the restraints would never allow it. Yeah? So, and you're alive? Can I please stay that way? Captain Zinn gave a shuffling as he stepped back. Do you know, he said in an almost conversational tone, speaking to himself as much as Barclay, that I am missing 2 fingers, memories of minor failures from my early days in the service. He paced for a bit, muttering to himself as the captive human silently watched in apprehension. Failures. Failures. They report failures. Raising his voice, he turned again to face the prisoner. Do you know what happens to a Janga that reports failure? Of course you do. You saw. That is not an act of a particularly brutal taskmaster. That is common. That is how the 9 empresses decree it. Failure must not reach the ears of your betters. It must be dealt with, personally. Or, when that cannot happen, it must be covered up, so no one can ever know your shame. That, the human started, but the Jenga captain cut him off. Yes, that. That is why there is no propaganda on our datanet. That is why it is all real reports, and all utterly useless. That is why captains most often guess at what is wrong, or make foolish maneuvers to cover up for flawed strategies. That is why you're winning. We all make mistakes, Barclay spoke with a steady voice for the first time in the interrogation. Zinn looked at him for a very long time. We do, he said, but only one of our people is bold enough to admit it. Tell me, what happens when you write your reports? They get filed with Fleet Command, and then a more experienced engineer designs the problem out of existence. An engineer's answer, but it made sense. The captain smiled. Of course they do. And they aren't punished or executed, so they become more experienced in things other than lying to their superiors. I understand. Too late, but I understand. He trailed off, before going over and snapping off the restraints of the human prisoner. Massaging his wrists, Barclay looked at his captor. So, what now? Now, I will submit the report of this interrogation. I'll do my best to show the dangers posed by humanity without making the Jenga appear weak. And I'll then await both my own execution and yours when the information causes us to lose ships in another fleet engagement. It'll be a tiring week, though I'll try to keep you comfortable. This war has been foolish. I should not say that, but it doesn't matter much now. My fate is inevitable, I suppose. Barclay leaned forward, putting something out of his boot. I mean, you could do that. He pulled back a small black box in his hand. Or, you don't seem like a bad guy, but maybe we could try an alternative to your crappy plan where we both die. What is that? Pocket knife. You really need to talk to your guards about proper search procedures. Someone should write a report. Yes, well, we've talked about this. Right. Well, I was hoping to escape the ship and maybe get back to human space. Want to come along? If you're dead anyway. Zinn looked over at the human, the man's eyes now scanning the room in a much more precise way than before, with a much more direct look on his face. The look of someone who was used to solving problems and recovering from minor setbacks, like being taken captive on an enemy warship. I don't suppose your military has a place for a now confirmed failure that's committed treason against the rival government. Already going for an officer position, huh? Captain Cheezen of the FSS Ascension into Redemption sat calmly on the bridge of his warship, crew busy around him. In the last 4 years since his escape, he'd become a bit of an important figure to the resistance movement amongst these first people. As the first actual defector to then join the Federation Space Service, he was a symbol that any Jagger, even one who had fought against humanity, could find a place amongst them if he so chose. And he had used his position to recruit quite a few of his old people into the new Federation that the humans were forming. He was a bit iffy on the idea of a multi-species government and society, but that was sort of the reason he stuck around. He could tell people that, and then, instead of removing limbs or tendrils, they would talk with him until someone's opinion changed, the coffee ran out, or the war called them back to duty. It was a novel experience for someone who grew up in the Imperium, and he was quite enjoying it so far. To the Federation sailors on his bridge, he was known as Smiles when they thought he couldn't hear them. and he took a bit of personal delight in knowing that he didn't have to personally injure them for their words, which of course fed back into the nickname. Right now they were preparing for battle, a Jenga fleet, one far too small for this fight, and just jumped into real space around Valhalla again, and Zin was the senior officer in the defense forces stationed here. Now, of course, after the heavy losses of the last battle, Humanity had reinforced the guard post here to something capable of handling anything. The Jenga, naturally, had sent a basically identical fighting force, as no one would have dared to suggest improvements to the last High Commander's plan. "Crew," he spoke out, verbally and with a note of amusement, "we're about to enter a deathly dance with the enemy. Tell me, is everything perfect?" A few of the bridge crew cracked out in smiles of their own. This ritual of theirs now part of the ship's own culture. "No, Captain," came back the chorus of answers. "And is everything going according to plan?" "Of course not, Captain." "Crew, tell me, how absolutely infallible am I? We don't trust you with anything more dangerous than string, Captain." The last line was different every time, and he'd noticed that they seemed to have a rotation of who got to deliver it. He was wondering if they drew straws to decide. Zin smiled broadly as his enemy warships moved into engagement range. "Then everything is right with the world. Helm, move us into position, and let us begin." End of story. I'd quickly like to thank our T5 Patreon and channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.